Good morning, everyone. My name is Erica Austin. I am with Dogwise, and I am joined this morning by Pat Miller, who is the author of the brand new book, Discover the World of Canine Cognition, Revolutionize Your Dog's Training, and Provide Access to all the brain candy that your dogs crave. Good morning, Pat. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Very glad to see you and to be here to talk about your brand new book. We've got people who are tuning in from all over the world. So we invite our audience members, as you're joining us, to let us know where you're listening from. Let us know if you have already pre-ordered your copy of the book. The book is out, but we are just now starting to ship that book out from Dogwise. So if you've pre-ordered your copy, let us know in the comments. If you haven't ordered your copy, stay tuned to the end. We're going to give you a special coupon code for watching us live and sticking with us today, so you can order your book from Dogwise and get a coupon. And then also I want to invite our people who are listening. Good morning, Kelly, who is tuning in from Maryland, ordered the book and wants to say hi to Pat. Hello, Kelly. I want to invite people who are tuning in also. This is a live Q&A discussion. So if you have questions for Pat about canine cognition or any of the other many books that she has written, please drop them in the comments and we'll be answering your questions live today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And Pat, we're going to start with the very first basic question, which is, what is cognition? Now, this book that you decided to write, I'm actually super excited about it because I heard you present on canine cognition and theory of mind and color discrimination at an APDT conference moons ago. We won't even say how many. And I remember being fascinated by it at the time and thinking, this is so fascinating. And now it's in a book, so anybody can access this information. And so what made you want to write this book? What made this book come about?
Well, first of all, you are absolutely correct. Cognition is fascinating, and that's what caught me up in it more than a decade ago. So cognition is mental processes, knowing, thinking, perception, problem solving. There's a whole long list of things that come under the heading of cognition. And essentially, it's mental abilities that until very recently, we were told dogs were not capable of. So what really captured me was that it was all so new and fascinating. And it's one of the things that I love about my training or my journey through the dog training world is that we keep learning new things and we keep finding new exciting discoveries about our dog's capabilities.
Yeah, you open up the book talking about the way things were and this idea of how way back when, in the last several hundred years, there was no scientific proof. Even if we had, anecdotal evidence, there was no scientific proof that dogs could think or that they could feel emotions or that they could feel pain even, and how far we've come.
Or use tools, right? Yeah.
Or use tools. What a wonderful example. One of the books in the recommended reading of your books is Mood Matters. And that is a book that talks a lot about not just animal emotions, but also mood. So emotions over time and kind of how we can scientifically track that and how observational learning is helping us to understand more about dogs. So yeah, how far we've come. And you also share your personal journey of being a crossover trainer and coming over to a positive reinforcement training side. We've got several people who are tuning in right now. I want to go ahead and highlight Stevie. Hello from Minnesota. Positive training is helping me in other fights too. You know what I mean? Stevie, we do know what you mean, and we are here for you and support you and the brave people of Minnesota. Our heart goes out to you. Positive reinforcement training has been transformational for so many of us. Pat, could you speak to that at all? To your journey with positive reinforcement training?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of people who have read my first book have read about my crossover journey, where my wonderful dog, Josie, who was training for her utility degree, I got out her training equipment and she hid under my back deck because I had been using the ear pinch to try to coerce her into retrieving a metal dumbbell, which she didn't want to put in her mouth. And I love training with her, and she loved training with me, and that broke my heart. And I stopped training and started
Mhm.
learning, which is one of the big differences in today's training world, is that educated trainers learn about behavior, and we never used to you'd go to your dog training class and they'd say, here's how you do it, and if it doesn't work, do it harder, and if that doesn't work, do it even harder. So the fact that the dog training profession has moved toward an educational basis, learning about how dogs think and learn and why they do what they do and how we can work with them without having to use force and coercion and pain.
Yeah,
And it's
and
interesting, the academies that I do, which I've been doing for more than 20 years now, I ask how many in the room are crossover trainers. And when I started doing academies, everybody raised their hand. And now rarely do I get somebody raising their hand. So we have a whole generation of trainers coming up who've been doing it right.
that's amazing. That is, and that's also very hopeful to hear. I think sometimes, especially on social media, online, there's a lot of keyboard warriors. There is so much division in so many elements of our life and so many areas of our life, as we are all experiencing, especially here in the United States, but even globally. And I think that it's easy to be on social media and to see things that are very discouraging, seeing trainers who are using methods we don't agree with, or we know that they could do better. And I think that having the grace for people and where they are in their journey, but also encouraging, like you said, learning and the education. And I love what you said a minute ago of, I stopped training and I started learning. What a powerful testimony to your journey. And so many of us, I think there are a lot of people who you just don't know, and you do what other people are saying or what has worked for them, and kind of when you know better, you do better. But until you know better, you're stuck in your own echo chamber of lived experience. So I'm grateful that you bring that up, and knowing that even if we're looking at social media, seeing trainers we don't agree with or methods that we don't agree with, that there is an entire generation of trainers who's coming up in the positive reinforcement world. And I do want to thank you, Pat, for being
Exactly.
a huge part of that journey for many people. A lot of us who started out as trainers, as baby trainers, reading the books that you wrote, and Karen Pryor's Don't Shoot the Dog and Patricia McConnell's The Other End of the Leash, or Jean Donaldson's Culture Clash. Like, your books are up there,
Yep.
my shelf, as well as ones that were very transformative in my journey. So, and speaking of being transformative in my journey, when I mentioned that you spoke at an APDT conference about self-awareness, something that you spoke about at that conference, and I'm glad pops up very early in the book in chapter 2, is something called theory of mind. And I had
Right.
never heard that concept before. And I try to explain it to people who want to geek out and talk about the nerdiness of how animals are working and functioning. But can you kind of give your definition of what theory of mind is and why it's relevant to our training practices with our dogs?
Sure. Theory of mind is the ability to have an awareness of the thinking of other beings, other creatures. So there are levels. So the lowest level we talk about is I know. So we know our dogs know what they know. Okay. And then I know, you know, which means they have an understanding of what we might know or be thinking in that moment. For example, when we had our corgi Lucy, I kept her Frisbees up on a bookshelf on the way to the back door. And if we were walking toward the back door, she would look up at the Frisbees and look at me as if she's saying, I know you know the Frisbees are up there. Get one for me. Okay. And then it keeps going in more and more levels. So there's I know, you know, I know. And then it can be I know, you know, I know, you know. We don't know how far up that level, that ladder dogs go, but there's no doubt in my mind that they at least have the I know, you know piece, and probably the I know, you know, I know piece when they're acting, even though we may not know, when they're acting like they think we might know something that they've done or something. Yeah.
I like the example of the
And that might
Frisbees. My dog likes Frisbees too. I think a lot of people relate to like a dog knowing how many treats you have in your pocket, or they know that they know that they know where you hid the food or where you set something out of their reach or something like that. And again, the way that animals communicate with us. And something I love so much about training and my positive reinforcement journey is learning that communication is a two-way street. We can tell the dogs everything, but what are they telling us? So I really appreciate that insight as well. We've got a comment here saying that Ingrid is tuning in from Spartanburg, South Carolina, home of Chaser the Border Collie. We did an interview with Piley Bianchi a couple of years ago about her book, For the Love of a Dog. And
I saw that, yeah.
Chaser is just such an inspirational story. If you all don't know about Chaser, go look her up after the interview. There's tons of great content on her and great books about
Absolutely.
Chaser.
And it was part of my foundation for moving into cognition was reading about Chaser and starting to understand that dogs' capabilities were so much greater than we had thought.
When I was very first learning to be a dog trainer, the school that I went to showed us clips of Chaser the Border Collie. And I remember thinking, no way, right? And now I have a Border Collie. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Ingrid said that she pre-ordered the book and have been following Pat for years and has seen clips of her in-person cognition classes. So glad for the book. We are all glad that this book is now available for the masses. So again, want to invite people, if you have questions for Pat about cognition or about anything, to go ahead and leave them in the chat. But so how did you learn about Chaser? Was that something that you saw on the news or read a book about, or how did that enter your awareness?
I must have heard about it somewhere. I must have heard about it somewhere and ordered the book and read the book. So yeah.
Yeah, it is a pretty amazing story. So another thing that you talk about in the book that you, again, talk about early on, and as someone who was part of the editing process, we wanted to make sure that this chapter made it pretty early into the book, about agency and the importance of choice and control. Another book that is one of our DogWise best-selling books is Canine Cognition. No, that's your book, which I know is going to be a bestseller. But Canine Enrichment for the Real World talks about agency and control as well. And Canine Enrichment defines agency as a choice between two desirable outcomes. Something that they talk about in one of their podcast interviews is that there was a skit in Britain one time where there was a street interview who went around and interviewed people and said, tea and cake or death? And then would hand them the microphone. And of course, people said, well, tea and cake, even if you don't like tea and cake. And I think that's something that happens a lot often in our dog training is we think we're giving our animals choice or control over their environment, but maybe it's a little bit closer to coercion because we're the ones holding the food or that kind of a thing. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of agency and how you define it and giving a dog a choice?
Sure. A lot of our attendees are probably familiar with Dr. Susan Friedman, who does some amazing work. She has online courses. And one of the things she talks about is how critically important it is to mental health, to have some control over your own environment. And I tell my clients all the time, think about it. Our dogs have so little control over what they get to do. We tell them when to go to bed, when to wake up, when they can go out and play, when they can go to the bathroom, when they can eat, what they can eat. If our lives were that tightly controlled, we'd be crazy. So Dr. Friedman suggests, and I fully believe, that this contributes to a lot of the behavior issues that we see with dogs in today's world that we didn't see so much when dogs ran loose on the farm and kind of got to do whatever they wanted to do most of the time. So agency, choice, giving dogs opportunities to make choices can help improve the quality of their lives as well as their behavior. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. We actually teach, you can see in this image, we teach dogs the cue you choose by offering them two different bowls of food and letting them choose which one that they want. And then we can use that cue in other circumstances when we have the opportunity to give the dogs a choice. Do you want to go outside or stay inside? You choose. Okay, most dogs go outside, but not all. So then we encourage people to look for opportunities to give dogs choices. I even have a trainer friend who actually makes 2 different bowls of dog food for her dog for dinner and lets her dog choose which bowl of food he wants for dinner.
That's such a great idea. I've never thought about that before. I mean, to expand
Yeah,
it to that idea of what do you want for dinner? And right here on this
right.
page, I did include that section that has your all-time favorite Dr. Friedman quote: "The power to control one's own outcomes is essential to behavioral health." And you can see that right there on the top of page 21 on the top right-hand side of the screen. To your point
Yeah.
about how we would go crazy if our lives were controlled as much as dogs' lives are. And, I think about that all the time when I'm out of the house for several hours of like, can I hold going to the bathroom for 6 hours? Because that's what I'm asking my dog to do at home, and like, that's kind of a big ask. I do
Yeah.
appreciate you pointing out this idea of like making 2 dinners. Like, yeah, my dog gets the same thing for dinner every day. And being able to give him the option of, do you have a preference, to extend that? I've heard of preference assessment tests for dogs, or for animals, not just dogs. And the idea of giving them that choice for dinner is fascinating. I often give my dog the choice between eating in his crate in a slow feeder or having like an enrichment item, usually something he wants to shred apart, paper towel roll full of kibble or something.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to try that, giving him 2 different options for for dinner. I have to think about that.
And here's another one. Here's another one. When you go to the pet supply store, take your dog with you, offer him 2 toys, let him choose which toy you buy for him.
Oh, what if he chooses all the toys, Pat? Then what do we do?
Get out your credit card.
Exactly. I have seen a few people, I see this on social media, which I'm glad to see that it's starting to permeate social media, people offering their dogs choices on a walk. So, you get to a fork in the road, and as long as it's 2 safe choices, let the dog lead the walk. And after all, hopefully when we're taking our dogs for a walk, it's about them, right? We're letting the dog have that time to be out and sniff and explore the world. So I like the idea of being able to let them choose in the real world too.
And the sniffari that's become very popular, which is letting your dog choose to sniff instead of marching around the block as fast as you can, right?
Yes. And I'm starting to see more people with longer lines, even, 8 and 10 and 12-foot leashes on back clip harnesses are becoming more popular. And I always cheer whenever I see someone out in the real world with, a treat pouch on their hip and their dog on a back clip harness. And going back to what we said earlier, like there's hope. The tide is shifting.
Yeah.
We are making progress, and more people are experiencing that with their dogs, which is, again, giving us a lot of hope.
I went to an event last summer in Boonesboro with hundreds of people, many, many, many dogs. And I did not see one single prong collar or choke chain. It warmed my heart.
That's wonderful. That's so wonderful. I love it when that happens, when I'm like, oh, I'm around my people now, I see that when I travel often. I'll go to a different city and be like, wow, I saw a lot of dogs in cafes or at breweries that are relaxed and not stressed, and they want to be there, and they're having a great life and not so tightly controlled. I think that's wonderful. We shared a quote on our social media page this week, and it was actually a series of quotes of images where we shared, but this was the one that really jumped out to me when I was looking for something to pull out of your book to kind of share and get people interested in, I want to learn a little bit more about that. So I didn't share the entire quote here. This is just one sentence out of an entire couple of paragraphs, which I can also share and show you all the page, because you don't have the book yet because it's still on pre-order. But pages 38 and 39, you talk about shaping, and not just the science behind shaping, but also, like I said, this quote where you say shaping is a cognitive skill. So I know that you explain it in the book, but could you kind of describe or define shaping for people who are tuning in, and then talk about why shaping is cognitive?
Okay. So shaping is taking a behavior and breaking it down that you want to teach your dog, and breaking it down into very small pieces, small steps, And starting by reinforcing the dog for offering the first step in that long list, and then gradually reinforcing the behaviors as they get closer and closer to your final behavior goal. It's a cognitive skill because your dog has to think and has to figure out, well, wait, what am I getting clicked and treated for? And what do I need to do to get her to click again? And what you do is when they've got step number one solid, then you put it like on an intermittent schedule of reinforcement. And when they don't get reinforced, they're likely to try something more. And then you get to click and treat the next step. So I do want to say luring can train behaviors just as well, just as strongly as shaping can, but shaping encourages the dog to think and participate more with his brain in the process rather than just following the treat. I use both in my training.
You talk about how shaping goes beyond. Oh, sorry, I had myself muted. I didn't want to interrupt you. Shaping goes beyond operant conditioning and has the dog actually think about what the next step is. And you even say, you know, the dog is right. Thinking, what do I do to make the click happen or to make the mark happen if you're not using a clicker? And you give the example of right. 101 things to do with a box or whatever, right? So in your chapter right. about free shaping, or your section about free shaping, and if anyone has not heard about this, it's such a wonderful opportunity for getting your animal to engage with an object and kind of make something up. And again, it becomes a dialogue. It's such a fun activity to do. I think that
it is, and kudos to Karen Pryor because it was Karen. What I realized after doing it with several dogs is you're developing a repertoire of behaviors for your dog so that when you want to shape something new, your dog has a whole list of things to choose from. And if they offer something and that isn't it, then they'll immediately offer something else. So it really speeds up the shaping process.
Yeah. And these actually, I ended up doing a shaping session with my dog. This is on this page. This is my dog, Dash, who is always ready to do clicker training. And he offered so many different things that we had to really narrow down. I actually called the layout designer of the book and said, I know we just needed one picture, but I have 6. How many can we fit? She said, maybe 4. So you really can do 101 things with a box if you've got a very eager learner. We've got a couple of questions for you, Pat. Mallory wants to know, Pat, what are your thoughts on talking buttons for dogs? It's fascinating to me, and I'd love to know what's going on cognitively for dogs who are learning to use them. Oh, Pat has thoughts.
I do have thoughts. I knew somebody would ask about this. I am not a fan. So far, I am not seeing any evidence that dogs are actually thinking about what the buttons say and deliberately pressing buttons to express their thoughts or feelings or emotions. I know that the manufacturer of the talking buttons paid for a study to be done at a Southern California university. No bias there, right? And as far as I know, the most that study has come out with is that dogs can recognize words when you push a button or when they push the button. If they push a button that says outside, they can run to the door because they know outside means go to the door. But it's not, I'm not seeing any evidence yet that says, gee, I really want to go outside, I'm going to push the outside button. Or even more, the ones that are like, I love you, right? They push the I love you button and you get all warm and fuzzy. And like, mostly, I read a really good article and I can't remember who the author was, but he talked about it's human interpretation of what they think the dogs are trying to say when they push the buttons. We don't have the evidence that the dogs actually are making deliberate choices about what they're saying when they push the buttons. Yeah, and the other thing I say is, why are we spending all this time trying to teach dogs our language when we should be doing more to learn their language?
I had a really great conversation with Alexis Devine, who works with Fluent Pet, and which is another talking button company. There's a couple out there now, but she said the same thing where, you know, this idea of trying to teach your dog to say, I love you, like, definitely don't start there. That's such a concept, right? But the idea of, yes, we're trying to improve communication, but there are so many people who are using buttons for it to be human-centered as opposed to dog-focused or dog-centered. And so if you're going to use buttons, you need to be intentional about how you're using them and how you're applying them, instead of, having it be something that is just human-centered or human-focused. So I do think it is a very fascinating discussion and ongoing conversation. We see a lot, I see a lot of it on social media, different videos of different things. And like you said, it's our interpretation of what we think they mean. And going back to our earlier discussion about theory of mind, what do we know that they know that we know? And how can we prove it? And I'm not a scientist, I just read books. So I'll wait for the science to catch up. We've got another question.
You are a citizen scientist.
I'm a citizen scientist, that's right. Julia asks, what are some helpful practical applications of canine cognition for the average dog owner thinking about my training clients? I will let Pat answer this question, but also stay tuned because we're going to talk about some of the examples that Pat includes in the book for you. But Pat, go ahead. I'll let you answer that.
Okay. So first of all, it's fun. And there's huge value in having fun with your dogs and encouraging your clients to have fun with your dogs. And it's impressive. So if you have a client who goes to rest homes or schools to demonstrate, dog training. Some of the things dogs can do, reading. You want to take your dog to a first grade class and show them that your dog can read. Okay. In terms of what can it do for me? How is it helpful for me? Certainly for service dogs, there's a long list of things. What if you could say to your dog, go in the other room and get my green socks? Right? And your dog can go in the other room, open the drawer, get out your green socks because they've learned color discrimination. Okay. So there's lots of those kinds of applications.
Yeah, there are tons and tons of ideas in the book, and Pat walks you through exactly how to teach these to your dog, or even to your dog classes. So shape discrimination is in here. Object discrimination is also in here. And like I said, it is very much a walking through step by step so that the people who are reading the book can easily find the some different examples and ideas. We did an author interview with Tim Lewis last week, and one of the things in his book, he said, how many colors are there? And we were talking about perception and, how many colors do humans see, and how do animals see differently or perceive differently? And I included this graphic as well for this talk of the dog's view versus the human's view. And again, thinking about how we perceive the world and how dogs perceive the world. So there is an entire section, and you'll actually see it on the cover of the book, that dogs are able to see, that you can see in that kind of spectrum of view. The blue and yellow is easier for dogs to see. So being able to teach color discrimination is something that Pat includes in the book as well. And you did mention, that is not the slide I wanted to show you. You did mention dogs learning to read. Can you talk a little bit about that? Give a little bit of a teaser for our listeners who are tuning in, and then I'll show a page from the book about that.
Sure. When I first heard about it, okay, so what you do is you write a word like sit, big letters on a whiteboard, okay? You show it to the dog and you cue him to sit, okay? And you hold up the sign and cue sit, and you hold up the sign and cue sit until you can hold up the sign and the dog sits without you saying sit, okay? So now your dog thinks black squiggles on a whiteboard means sit. So you have to pick a different word, and then we usually go to down, okay? And you do the same thing with down. So it's 4 letters, so it looks a little different from the sit. We do the same thing with down, and you hold up the sign and cue him to down, and hold the sign to cue him to down until you can hold up the sign and he lies down without you cueing it. And your dog thinks, well, she changed her mind. Now a whiteboard with black squiggles on it means down instead of sit, okay? So then you start swapping them out. You alternate, randomly. One sit, and if you need to cue it, one down, need to cue it until he will sit, and you hold up the sit sign, down when you hold up the down sign. Okay. So when I first heard about this, my thought was, well, that's not reading. That's just looking at black squiggles on a white. Wait, that's what reading is looking at black squiggles and understanding that they have some meaning. So in our academies, we haven't gone beyond teaching those 2 words sitting down. I do know some trainers who have taught more than 2 words, 3 or 4 words. What I would love to see and challenge someone to do is to put words in a sentence and have a dog follow the cues in a sentence. We haven't done that yet.
Like a behavior chain is kind of what you're thinking? Or a different sentence?
Yeah.
That's a really great idea. All right.
Well, it wouldn't be a behavior chain because you're going to change it up. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was listening to you speak at that APDT conference years ago, and you were talking about how you had just started teaching this reading and holding up the signs, and someone in the back of the room raised their hand and said, isn't that just, like you said, isn't that just looking at squiggles on a paper? And isn't that just really advanced object discrimination? And you said, what do you think reading is? And the whole room just went,
that's right.
Wait a minute. So I think that's one of my favorite actually stories and interactions I've ever had with you, was that moment of, wait a minute, that is what reading is. So I really do appreciate
light bulb.
that light bulb moment. Yeah. Exactly. We've got people who are leaving some comments saying they're so excited for this book. Dognition Week was the best fun. And we've got, like I said, a global audience, people tuning in from Denmark. Great to hear your voice. Proud of having learned from you. How I approach behavior and behavior change is directly from your heart and mind. What a wonderful testimonial. And then it looks like we've got a couple of questions coming in. I'm experiencing aging in dogs for the first time in my adult life as my husky approaches 14 years old. She is still lively, though her hearing is going. Does this book address different learning and cueing techniques with dogs? Great question, Emily.
Well, different learning techniques as they relate to cognition. Not really different cueing as in how do I work with a vision impaired or hearing impaired dog, but absolutely marvelous to do cognition with aging dogs. Just like keeping human brains active, it helps keep your dog's brain active. So you may need to look at some of the exercises and figure out how to alter them a little bit to work for an aging dog who's perhaps, losing some of their senses, but absolutely cognition things can be done with aging dogs.
This seems like a great segue is we are learning more and more about just how important it is to let dogs sniff. You have mentioned a Sniffari. Chapter 11 is all about nose brain candy games. So tying that powerful dog nose into brain candy. Can you talk a little bit about how important that sense of smell is to cognition and to dog brain function, which may be something that Emily could use with her dog as well?
Sure. And I want to call out Alexandra Horowitz because she was one of the canine behavior scientists who first really drew our attention to the value of scent with dogs. And in fact, there's this whole self-recognition consciousness test that they've done called the mirror test, which some of you may have heard about. And that's supposed to demonstrate self-awareness, okay? So you put a dot of paint on a toddler's cheek and they look in the mirror and they touch their own cheek. That's supposed to show that they have self-awareness. They realize that's them in the mirror. And at first they said only humans and limited primates could do that. And then they discovered a bird that could do it. They discovered a fish that could do it. They discovered that ants could do it. So it's no longer like just us higher ups on the chain that are self-aware, but dogs don't do it. And one of the things Alexandra Horowitz realized was that because for dogs, olfactory is more important than visual. So she created a test that showed that dogs have self-awareness through their olfactory senses, okay? And then more and more, actually the training world for quite some time has realized the value of using scent work to help fearful dogs gain confidence. And author Will Bangura has just published a book called Sniff to Soothe, which takes a deep dive into the science behind this and includes very extensive games, exercises that you can do with your dog's nose. So I use this thing called nose games. It's not the same as nose work. Nose work is that competition thing where they do a smell this smell, find this smell, which is how they train narcotics detection dogs. I like to do, no, I'm sorry, that's specific scent detection for narcotics dogs. I like to do smell the smell, find the smell, which is what they use for like search and rescue, where here's the person's shirt, go find that person. So I have a whole kind of protocol for teaching that. And I was teaching it as a 6-week class. And I had a woman and her 8-year-old son and their little terrier mix who took that 6-week class 2 times in a row. And at the end of the 12 weeks, the 8-year-old kid could go hide in the woods and the dog could find him. So it really engages them. It engages their brain. It's surprisingly tiring. We think, oh, their noses are so good, this is easy for them. But because it uses their brain, it's surprisingly tiring. And dogs and their humans tend to absolutely love it and have fun with it.
I want to let you know that I have a copy. I just finished reading it of Will Bangura's new book. Dogwise is going to have this in stock probably in about 3 weeks. So hang tight. We want to support small businesses and not big, you know what store I'm talking about. But Will Bangura's Sift to Snooze book is going to be on Dogwise. I have read it. It is very, very good. Dogwise has a book that we published a few years ago called A Dog's Fabulous Sense of Smell. And in that book, she talks about some practical games to work on with your dog. And I always remember chapter 8 of that book is teaching your dog how to find your keys or anything else that you lose based on smell. And I was like, I don't believe that this is a thing. And I totally went through that chapter 8 of that book and taught my dog how to do it. And I was like, well, that's a cool party trick, whatever. And then months later, I was actually playing frisbee with him in a field, was throwing frisbees, and then walked back to the car and realized that my keys had fallen out of my pocket. And I was like, well, we're stuck forever. And then I was like, wait, no, hold on. I can fix this. And I sent him out into the field. We were on a leash and we went looking and he found and retrieved my keys. And I was like, yes. So it can absolutely have some practical hands-on applications for us, but also, like you said, it does wear them out. Like it's such good mental enrichment for a dog to be able to not just sniff on a sniffari, but asking them to have some cognitive function and do some discrimination. And discrimination is something that you talk about a lot in the book. And there's actually whole chapters in here about how to teach your dog how to do these behaviors and have that conversation with them. So extremely valuable.
Yep. And great activity for indoors in bad weather. You don't have to have a great big field outdoors to be able to do it, right? And if you combine naming objects with your scent discrimination, then you can say, find my keys. They know they're looking for the keys, and they also have that scent association.
Yes, absolutely. Just wanted to make sure we're not missing any other questions. Like I said, if you've got questions, drop them in the chat for us. Something I did want to talk about, I know we're talking about a lot of books today, but there's a chapter in your book where you're talking about social learning, and I think you call it copycat. It's can dogs learn? Yeah, can dogs learn from imitating us? And it's in chapter 13 in your book. But Claudia Fugaza Dogwise just released the second edition of her book, Do As I Do, which I remember when I was reading through your book, I was like, hey, did you know there's an updated edition and it's got a streaming video? And some of the photos that are in chapter 13, I actually, again, was talking with our layout designer and was like, oh, wait, no, use this one. Oh, wait, no, use this one, because there's just like so many cool examples. I can't even remember which one we ended up putting in the book, but I think that we ended up picking the one where there was a girl that was like crawling into a crate and then the dog ran into the crate. I work with some fearful dogs, and we've been doing some shaping with the dog that I work with who is like just not she's not having it. She's not going in the crate. I'm like, maybe if I just teach her the copy game, then we could teach her to be more brave about going in the crate. There were so many fun examples in the book about how this applies. So can you talk about the imitation learning that we're learning more about every day and how you use it in your classes?
Sure. This was one, like I say in the book, years ago, I would confidently stand in front of my academy students and say, dogs can't learn through imitation, right? We've been told dogs can't learn through imitation. And then there were a couple of scientists who did studies with puppies. One was puppies from narcotics detection dog mothers who were allowed to watch their mothers working as 8-week, 12-week-old puppies. And then when they started learning the tasks at 6 months, they learned them much more quickly than puppies who didn't get to watch their mothers working. And so then we were told, well, okay, puppies can learn through imitation from other dogs, but adult dogs can't learn through imitation. Ken Ramirez, the wonderful Ken Ramirez, taught his dog a copy cue so that his dog learned to copy another dog. And what he did is he set up a barrier between him and the other dog's handler with the dogs at the far end. So his dog could see the other dog, but couldn't see the other handler. The other handler would give her dog a hand signal to do a behavior. Ken would tell his dog copy, and his dog would do what that dog had just done, even if it was behavior he hadn't previously taught his dog. So then we said, well, okay, adult dogs can learn from other dogs, but they can't learn to imitate humans. And then Claudia Fugaza came along and showed us otherwise. And it is amazing. I remember I was working on an article for Whole Dog Journal. So I started doing it with one of my dogs, Bonnie. And it's such an eye-opener, absolutely such an eye-opener. So we do it in our cognition academies. I don't do it in my regular classes because it's a fairly complex protocol, but we do it in our cognition academies and people have a ton of fun with it. The best, there's 3 phases. The third phase is when they imitate a behavior you haven't taught them before. And it's just such an eye-opener, such a mind-blowing thing to see. And that, how useful could that be? How useful could that be for teaching dogs things instead of, yeah.
I know that people have applied the concepts in this book to teaching service dogs, like how much faster they can teach a service dog,
Yes.
like you said, to retrieve green socks or to open a drawer, to close a drawer, to, all sorts of things. Like the applications for this social learning are probably endless. And the thing you were talking
Yes.
about, well, they couldn't do it with humans. Well, now we have not just pictures in this book, but actual video examples of Claudia showing, demonstrating what the process looks like. And it's great stuff. So anyone who's into that, I would highly recommend. I actually saw a video of Ken Ramirez I think when he was it was an older video that he shared at a presentation from when he was working at the Shedd Aquarium. And he actually did this same social learning with one animal teaching another one with dolphins, and had a dolphin that knew a behavior and a dolphin that hadn't learned the behavior. And then they were kind of in there was a visual barrier, but we also know that dolphins communicate underwater with echolocation. And I've seen that hands-on of dolphins being like, this is the answer, so there's so much going on there and what we still have to learn about cognition with animals. I think that something else I did see Ken present on before, and you talk about it.
Wait, before you go there, go there, I want to say a couple more things about imitation. One, it makes biological survival sense that certainly the young of species, but other species can learn by watching each other, because why should they have to figure everything out themselves, right? And the other thing is, I wanted to share Claudia Fugaza's latest thing. She has taught dogs to copy human behavior from a video screen.
I saw that. I haven't really dived into it, but that is incredible. Next, so now that you've said this, Pat, we can teach them how to read and we can teach them how to watch TV. So I think what I hear you saying is that we're not going to have to train our dogs in the future. We can just pop them in front of YouTube and they'll teach themselves.
I don't want. No.
Can we teach them how to read?
Remember?
That's right. We do keep coming back to that two-way communication and relationship. I almost forgot. Thank you for reminding me. What I was going to say is there's also a section in here where you are talking about teaching dogs to, not teaching dogs to count, but dogs that know how to count, or learning some number discrimination. And you walk through that as well. That is, again, something I had seen Ken speak about once and was really just blown away by this idea of dogs counting. I'm pretty sure you mentioned this in the book. I know that he has spoken about, there's a little bit of anecdotal evidence that female dogs might be better at counting than male dogs. And have you heard that?
Oh, I hadn't.
So Ken says that the hypothesis might be because they have to be able to keep count of their puppies, which makes a lot of sense to me, but we have no proof for that. So can you talk a little bit about this, teaching dogs to count? And, this is, like you said, this might be something that could be a good application if you are taking dogs, therapy dogs into schools or that kind of a thing. What other than just, or is this just fun? Why should we teach our dogs to do this?
Well, I'm trying to think of a practical application. You could say, bring me 3 of something and have them bring you 3 of something. Okay. If I remember correctly, when Ken started doing this, he was told dogs couldn't count beyond like 7. And he's got a dog that's now counting at least up to 14. Okay. So, it's a good brain workout. And again, practical wise, I can see, maybe asking them to bring you a specific number of something. But you start, as you see in this picture, you have one board that has 1 dot, one board that has 2 dots, and then you have the tray that has 1 object, and you're asking the dog, like, how many, or whatever you want your cue to be. And helping them understand what it is that you're asking them. By, if they don't get it right, you can help them, you can show them which one it is until they get the concept. So cognition is about concepts, and here the concept is about counting.
I like that you brought that up, that cognition is about concepts. It is, I was at a non-dog related book club last night, just reading books for fun, which is what I do in my spare time. When I'm done reading books at work, I just go read books for fun. And I was trying to explain to some of these non-dog people, like, what this interview was about and what this book was about. I was telling them about it, and they were like, so it's about how dogs learn. And I said, yeah, but beyond that, it's also about how dogs think. And, you're right. What you just said about cognition is about concepts, and it's so far beyond sit down, stay. And it's even far beyond, behavior change and things like that, where you're maybe coming to help a dog that is got separation anxiety or reactivity. Like, this is obviously on a whole different level. So I'm, again, like so many people in the chat, very excited about this book becoming available to more and more people. On the topic of agency, giving our dogs control and some consent as well, you have a section of the book where you talk about teaching the bucket game. And this is mostly related to grooming. Is that correct? Or maybe medical procedures?
Yeah, husbandry procedures in general. And the bucket game is one, the chin rest is another. The bucket game was the brainchild of Chirag Patel. And both the bucket game and the chin rest teach the dogs agency. They teach the dogs, you have a way to communicate to me when you want me to stop what I'm doing. Okay. And the way with the bucket game, they look at the bucket, and as long as they're looking at the bucket, they're giving you permission to proceed. And if they look away from the bucket, you will stop. And you teach them that concept. Chin rest, they're resting their chin. Some people do it on hands. I like to do it on a rolled up towel so my hands are free. But same thing, as long as they're resting their chin, they're giving you permission to proceed. And if they lift their chin up, they know you will stop. So I did this. My dog Bonnie had long curly hair that matted easily. And she was quite comfortable with me brushing her head, her shoulders, her torso. She didn't like having her back end brushed. And she learned the bucket game courtesy of several of my Behavior Modification Academy students. And I was amazed by the difference it made in her demeanor, because she never bit or got nasty about it. But when I was grooming her hind end, you could tell she would get tense and she would want to leave. After the bucket game, she was totally relaxed about it because she knew she could ask me to stop, and I would. And so she no longer felt the need to ask me to stop. It really was amazing. So if you're going to use this, like at your vet hospital, if you're going to use it, you have to honor it. So if you have to be working with a veterinarian, for example, who will agree, if my dog looks away from the bucket or lifts his chin up, you have to stop what you're doing. It's a contract with your dog.
I like that it's a contract. So I want to know, if people are tuning in, leave us a comment. Have you taught a chin rest or the bucket game to your dog? Has anyone tried this at home with their dog? So leave a comment if you've done that, or if you want to do it, want to learn more. I taught my dog a chin rest in my hand. Big regrets, because like you said, I don't have free hands to do the things I need to do. So I also have found so I learned from my mistake and do it Pat's way, where you teach them to do it on a rolled up towel on a chair, on your lap or something. It would be so much easier, because I also have found, and I found this with clients as well, where if they've taught their dog how to shake or give a high five, that there can be some ambiguity of, asking for a chin rest instead of a shake or a paw. So it is definitely something that if I could start over, I would do it with the rolled up towel. We have a couple of people who've said they like the concept, but they haven't done it yet. Emily, you haven't done it yet. And Julia says, yes, I have taught a chin rest to my dogs and look forward to learning about the bucket game. This does come with that idea of what is sometimes called a start button behavior, where the dog is, or the animal, doesn't need to be a dog, is saying, yes, you may start this procedure. I give my consent to this. And again, since we're working with nonverbal communicators, we have to find a way to be able to, it's very clear. And I appreciate that you said it's a contract. So if they say, I need you to stop for any reason, we have to honor that. We've got Stevie says, I do a chin rest all the time with my clients. It's awesome. One of my dogs went from meds and a muzzle at the vet to unrestrained blood draw with consent. That is a wonderful win, Stevie. Thank you for sharing that with us. Mallory says, I would love to try the chin rest for my dog. He's under a year and will not let me do anything. He hates nail trims, baths, and recently had an ear infection, was so fearful of the ear wash. That is incredibly common. Dogs who don't want us messing with their ears or their mouths or toothbrushing or anything like that. I'd love the opportunity to teach him in a way to have some agency and build some trust with him. So that's wonderful, Mallory. We would definitely recommend you check out this chapter 14, about the cooperative care with husbandry behaviors. And one of the recommended reading books as well is a book that you helped, I would say, co-author, Pat, which is Veterinary Cooperative Care, and has lots of chapters and information about how to implement some of these things with our animal learners, not just at the vet, but at home, and preventative care as well. So,
and Erica, you can generalize that chin rest to another surface. You're not stuck with it in your hands. You can generalize it to a towel.
Luckily, we have a verbal cue for it. So I did have him learn how to do it on a towel. I need to clean up my mechanics of when I'm reinforcing, because sometimes when I'm coming towards his teeth, it's with a toothbrush, and sometimes it's with food. So we're trying to clean up our mechanics there, where I'm actually feeding him in a bowl separate, and he has a different reward marker, because I'm learning. Like you said, I stopped training and I started learning, and my dog, it's like we talked about, a relationship and some communication and feedback, where I'm learning what's working for him or not working for him, and what's working that did not work for me to not have my hands available to open his ear and, put in ear wash or just check and look if I'm needing to hold his little chin in my hand. So good feedback. We do only have a few minutes left, so if you've got a question for Pat, I would encourage you to drop it into the chat. We do have a question from earlier, was wondering if mirror neurons come into play in cognitive games. We actually had a very similar question about this last week when I was talking with Tim Lewis, who wrote Biology of Dogs, and he was talking about neurons and brain chemistry and how the input goes to the brain and things like that. Mirror neurons seem to be a hot topic. Do you know anything about this, Pat?
I do not. What did Tim say?
He said he didn't know. I was really hoping you were going to have the answer. He said he didn't know and he was going to have to look it up. So we'll get back to you. We might have to do an author interview just about mirror neurons when we do a little bit more research. The person who had asked about it for Tim's talk was actually asking about the social learning and if it was the mirror neurons that were playing a part in social learning. And that was actually what Tim didn't know. So we'll get back to you. We'll do some more research. Any other questions that you have for us that we might be able to answer? I do want to point out
end with one I can answer.
Oh yeah, Leah, let's give us a good question that Pat can answer. I do want to point out, I'm so glad we were able to include this picture in the book where you talk about the next steps and kind of what does the future of cognition look like, but also expanding to different species. And so many of us who have dogs also work with horses, or we have cats, or some people who have birds and things like that. So consider this your invitation that if you work with dogs, this book can be applicable to some of the other species in your life as well. So wanted to say that. And then we do have a question I think you can probably answer. Emily wants to know if you could summarize your book into a few key words, which would you select? Wonderful question, Emily.
I would say that working with your dog's brain enhances your relationship and can improve quality of life for both you and your dog.
What a fantastic summary of the book. As I promised, I am going to give you all a coupon code for Pat's new book, but I wanted to include some recommended reading. There is an entire section at the end of the book with some recommended reading from Pat, but I selected a few books. There are definitely some books that we brought up in our conversation today, including The Thinking Dog, which is Crossover to Clicker Training, a fantastic but very big brick of a book, and that Veterinary Cooperative Care that that Pat co-authored. And I do want to include the coupon code for you all who stayed till the end. If you have not pre-ordered your copy of Pat's book, if you use the code FBLive20 at checkout at dogwise.com, you'll be able to save 20%. And we have not put this book on sale yet. So this is just for people who either tuned into this live or watched the replay. And we do have one more question that I think is a great question to end on. Ingrid wants to know, how can trainers or teachers work this into group classes, these canine cognition exercises?
I think there's a lot of answers to that. It depends. My favorite answer to most dog training questions, it depends. It depends on what kind of classes you teach, who your clients are. If you read the book, there are some of the games that are simple, and those are ones that you could include even in your basic good manners class. And then the more complicated ones like imitation, you'd need to reserve for more advanced classes. But I've actually taught a 6-week cognition class as well. So if you have a group of clients who are, interested in advancing further into an understanding of their dog's brain, you can do a class completely on cognition.
That's such a great idea for people who have done basic, intermediate, and advanced classes and what's next. What a fun idea to be able to do an entire group class of cognition class. So give that a try. And
especially if you have clients, especially if you have clients who aren't looking to go do competitive stuff. They're not into agility and all that stuff, but they want to continue doing things with their dogs.
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Ingrid, because I think that's something we're always looking for is how can we apply this? How can we use it and make it practical or make it appealing to, we know as professional trainers, well, this is good for your dog's brain. Shouldn't that be enough? But I think, Pat, when you first said at the beginning, why you should do this? Because it's fun. It's just fun to see what your dog can do and to try something different. So I really appreciate that. Big thank you to everyone who joined us today. A huge thank you to Pat. Thank you for joining us and for being willing to answer everyone's question. And I'm going to leave this here for all of you who joined us live today. We will see you next time. Thank you so very much.